This is Jed Distler, and welcome to the Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Back in 1994, my goodness, that was 30 years ago, Gregor Benko and Ward Marston produced a 2-disc release on the VAI label that featured all 19 of Franz Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsodies. Each Rhapsody featured a different pianist, and no pianist was repeated in this collection. And this compilation combines historic recordings with a few modern performances that were recorded especially for the collection. And there are some archival live performances that are, I guess, historic in retrospect. Gregor Benko was the founder of the International Piano Library, which is now the International Piano Archives at the University of Maryland. And Ward Marston is one of the world's most prominent conservators of old recordings, and he's transferred and remastered countless recordings from the 78 RPM era for various labels, and more recently, of course, for his own Marston Records label. All of the performances are fascinating and riveting in different ways. The first Hungarian Rhapsody, which is kind of a long piece, and for me it goes on a little too long, it's played by Alexander Borowski. This is his 1938 recording from 78. Then the famous second Hungarian Rhapsody that was played by everybody from Tom and Jerry to Bugs Bunny. We have this in the classic 1940 Beno Moiseyevich recording. What style and command and ease, and there are more than a few humorous touches to this performance. Now, the third Rhapsody features Irvin Nyíregyházy. This pianist started out as one of the most highly scrutinized and well-documented child prodigies ever. But his early adult career ended almost as soon as it began, partly due to bad management and bad luck, yet mostly due to his volatile personality. Nyíregyházy lived in mostly cheap hotels for a lot of his adult life, where he composed prolifically and he drank to excess. His sexual recklessness led to numerous unsavory entanglements, as well as 10 marriages. But his idiosyncratic and hyper-romantic kind of pianism elicited serious attention for a short time in the 1970s, thanks to his being rediscovered by a handful of aficionados, including Gregor Benko. And to say that Nyíregyházy's reading of the Third Rhapsody is individual is like saying that King Kong is big. But all I can say is that no one would dare play the Third Rhapsody in this way in a piano competition nowadays. The Hungarian Rhapsody No. 4 features a live 1979 performance with Earl Wild on the top of his form. For Hungarian Rhapsody No. 5, we have the 1946 Scherer-Tchaikovsky recording made on 78s for the Vox label. The sound quality isn't great, but Tchaikovsky had great style, and he was an irrepressible Liszt player. The Sixth Rhapsody, with its famous right-hand repeated octaves that can test even the greatest virtuosos, is next, and the producers could have chosen Vladimir Horowitz, but, there is plenty of virtuosity and poetry in this 1927 recording with Misha Levitsky. I'm glad they chose it for this collection, actually. Now, the Rhapsody No. 7 is a piece that is relatively overlooked in relation to the other Rhapsodies. And for this collection, we have the recording by the Leschetizky pupil Mark Hamburg, and he was one of the most erratic pianists who ever recorded. You never knew what you would get with him. For example, his recording of the Sixth Rhapsody is a total mess. But he did get it together for number 7, and this is one of the best items in his pioneering cycle devoted to the 15 Rhapsodies. It wasn't until the 1960s, I think, that pianists started to incorporate Rhapsodies 16 through 19 in the Hungarian Rhapsody canon. Hungarian Rhapsody number 8 features a live 1973 performance with Malcolm Frager. He was an absolutely marvelous pianist, and unfortunately he made relatively few recordings for someone of his stature, and he died way too young. Hungarian Rhapsody number 9, honestly, is not my favorite Rhapsody, and I think it goes on way too long for what it has to say. But we have a live performance by another great pianist who died way too young, Joseph Villa, and he was such a fantastic Liszt player. And this performance of the 9th Rhapsody is a great example of Joseph Villa's ardent identification with the Liszt idiom and total command of it. Hungarian Rhapsody number 10 is next, and although I probably would have picked Arthur Rubinstein's late 1930s recording, I'm happy that they did pick the Guillermo Novaes recording from 1962. This is a very colorful and poetic rendition, and it's great to hear it. Now, the 11th Rhapsody, well, the producer's selection didn't surprise me at all. This is Alfred Cortot's classic version on 78s from the late 1920s. This is one of the best 11th Rhapsodies ever. This was a no-brainer of a selection. The 12th Rhapsody features a live 1979 performance with George Bolet. Bolet was always more inspired in front of an audience than when recording in the studio, and it really shows in this performance. Claudio Arrau gives a full-bodied and really musicianly account of the 13th Rhapsody, and this comes from a Columbia recording session from, I think, 1951 or 1952, I don't remember. The session encompassed 5 Hungarian Rhapsodies. These performances remained unissued and unedited until the Desmar label and the International Piano Archives brought them out on LP in the late 1970s. They eventually were issued by CBS for an Arrau compilation celebrating the pianist's 80th birthday. And of course, they are part of the complete Claudio Arrau Columbia and RCA recordings box set that Sony BMG brought out a few years ago, which I annotated, by the way. Hungarian Rhapsody number 14 was the basis for Liszt's Hungarian Fantasy for piano and orchestra. And for this collection, the pianist Valery Bukrinsky recorded the 14th Rhapsody especially for this compilation. He is a wonderful pianist who is still active and playing just marvelously. The Hungarian Rhapsody number 15 is the famous Rakoczy March, and one of its very best recordings remains the one made in 1932 by Solomon, and I'm so happy it's included here. Now we get to the late period Rhapsodies 16, 17, and 18. These are relatively short, and they're typical of Liszt's late style. There's not much really to say about these works. But the performances here are, with 16, you have George Cifra. With Hungarian Rhapsody 17, you have Sviatoslav Richter. And for Hungarian Rhapsody 18, we have Louis Kentner. Hungarian Rhapsody number 19 reverts back to the longer forms that Liszt used for earlier Rhapsodies. And again, we have a recording here made especially for this collection by a pianist whom I think is exceptional in every way, and I also think she's profoundly overlooked. This is Janice Weber. I have been a fan of her for decades and decades. So there we have it, all 19 of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsodies, each with a different pianist and mostly historic recordings. And because this set came out about 30 years ago, I guess I would consider the two selections that were newly recorded at the time for this collection. Maybe now, in perspective, we can call them historic. Anyway, Gregor Benko and Ward Marston did a splendid job curating this release, and happily, this 2-disc set on the VAI label is still available. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Thank you for listening, and I hope you and I will be together for the next episode. Take good care.